Giants fans, it is with great pleasure we welcome in the new Assistant General Manager of the New York Giants, Brandon Brown, and talk a little bit about this opportunity that you have coming back to the New York area and joining the Giants.
Well, Bob, one, thanks for having me. And the biggest thing about coming back to this area is just a sense of responsibility. You know, this is one of the flagship franchises in the league. And the biggest thing coming back to this area is knowing that, you know, the fan base holds you accountable. And it means so much more than just football. You know, a lot of people depend on this. And I just feel like being a part of this organization, I don't want to let anybody down. And I know we have a collective effort in getting back to where we all want to be, where the fan base wants to be, where the organization wants to be.
You know, obviously, you're a Fordham graduate. I'm a Fordham graduate. And when you think of Fordham, you think of the Lombardi Center and
right.
Vince Lombardi and his ties to the Giants. And, of course, Wellington Mara.
Right.
Do you get a sense of an added responsibility knowing the history of everything?
100%. It's the biggest thing, like the word that comes to my mind is nostalgia, right? It's all the stories you hear about, one, when you step on campus at Fordham. And then after being on campus, the responsibility that you have as a student athlete while you're there to be, not just represent the name on the back of your jersey if you're playing, but also the logo on your front, which is a team. And then as you transition, you hear all the stories about the Giants and the history and the great rich tradition. And it's no different. It's a carryover. And we all have, like I said, a responsibility to not just do our best, but exhaust all the resources and be progressive and forward thinking so we can get back to where we want to be.
Talk about your interaction with Joe Schoen as you were interviewing for the job. You spent 5 years in the Eagles organization. How well did you know Joe coming in?
So with Joe and myself, we've crossed over on the road on the college side, and he's someone I've always admired from afar. He's a tireless worker, and a lot of the traits I see in myself, I see in him. And you always want to work with like-minded people. It's no different when you're in the business world and you network and you see people that you like and you like the way they operate, and you say, hey, one day I want to work with this guy. And with Joe, it's been we've been like peanut butter and jelly. It's just in sync, where it's like when you're a kid, you go to camp, and you meet a guy that becomes your friend. You're like, I didn't know I needed this kind of friend. And that's how it's been with Joe, where we just really connected and in sync. And we have the synergy where we know, like, listen, we have a plan and we have to execute the plan. And we have the right people in place to move forward and get what we need to get done to get back where we want to be.
And he's sort of created a role for you similar to what his role was, right, in Buffalo, where you're in charge of player personnel on the pro side. But there's also that cross-training where you're going to be heavily involved as far as the college concepts are concerned, too.
Correct. And I think when you talk about marrying the pro side with the college side, I like using business analogies, and it's like knowing the marketplace, right? You can't really put accurate value to a player into his role until you know where he is on the market. And once we understand the marketplace, we're able to find the sweet spots or where we can find players within the margin, right? It's guys that, hey, may not be super attractive maybe on the total market, but it's going to fit what Dayball wants to do. It's going to fit what Wink wants to do. It's going to fit what T-Mac wants to do on special teams. And when we do that, it allows us, when we want to make the big splashes, we can do it in a very conscious way and efficient way. And we have the right checks and balances because we know we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and done everything in the right way, that there is no negligence in spending, no negligence in evaluation.
Right. And listen, everybody who's watching this is a Giant fan, and eyes wide open when Joe Schoen came in. He understands that there is a salary cap situation that has to get rectified. So you have to find those guys that are productive players that fit within a certain price range, correct?
Correct. And when you find those players, like I said, it's not just going for the big splash. It's finding, one, the job requirement. We get that from having a tight relationship and having cohesive communication with offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams of what is the task that's being asked. It's very much like if you're in a restaurant, it's a chef to sous chef relationship, right? And we can't go out and buy the groceries, quote unquote, unless we know exactly what the recipe calls for.
You spent the last 5 years in Philadelphia. What were some of the things that you learned as being part of that organization? Although it's a rival organization, obviously it's an organization that's had success, a Super Bowl championship organization, but lessons that you take moving forward?
Just being progressive, pushing the needle. Biggest thing I like to use is, when everyone knows what we know is no longer important. We always want to be pushing the envelope forward and not be reactive to what's going on, whether it's, evolving in scheme, whether it's evolving in player usage, whether it's evolving in knowing where to find players. And that's a process that I, put into practice in Philadelphia was football players come in every walks of life. And that was done, shown through finding players in Canada, finding players who played rugby, finding players that came from small schools. It doesn't matter. If you have I call it the developmental mindset and the developmental physical traits, and, you have the aptitude to learn, then, it's our job in terms of personnel, coaching, and player development to get you onto, the right onboarding process and then maximize you as you're going on in your role and eventually on game day.
And that's where a term that gets thrown around a lot, chemistry. Right. But that's where chemistry comes in. And people think sometimes it's just chemistry of the team, the locker room. But there also has to be chemistry within the building between the front office, the player evaluators, the decision makers, kind of have to all be on the same page in order for this to work, right? Right.
So, Bob, the term I like to use is synergy, right? It's having open door communication where a good idea can come from anywhere. And when we find a player, it's not your guy, it's not my guy, it's our guy. It's, what is our envision of what does a New York Giant look like? And at each position, and holding everyone to the standard. And we have to be able to poke holes in whether it's the roster, whether it's in position rooms, and know that when the standard isn't being met, we have to make changes. When the standard is being met, we have to applaud it and lift it up. It goes both ways. It's a salt and sugar approach. And because salt and sugar looks the same, but it tastes different and it feels different, right? So when we do those kind of things, it allows us to be collaborative in the process, right? We need to know how the guy is from a 360 view, whether what he is in the building, what he's on the field, and what he is in the community, because all that plays a factor into what our brand is and what our style of ball is.
Brandon, we appreciate a couple minutes. I know this is going to be a fun journey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's Brandon Brown, the new Assistant General Manager of the New York Football Giants.